Welcome, everyone, to the Rotoworld Football Podcast, the true official Rotoworld Football Podcast. Any other ones that might mention our name?
Frauds.
They're frauds. They're not real. I'm Josh Norris. That's Ian Hartitz, the gift god. What's up, man?
I'll take that nickname. Not much, man. Week 11. I feel like we still got the best pod ahead of us, though.
I agree with you. Ian, you are 3-0 in helicopter props last 3 weeks. One, can you explain the helicopter prop? And two, explain your process to go along with it.
So on the season, the helicopter prop is actually 4-1-1.
Excuse me. I didn't do enough research.
Started off the year with a bang. Deshaun Jackson, 2-touchdown performance, predicted that. Came back, Curtis Samuel, 1 touchdown. If they find the end zone, I call it a draw. And then we lost the pilot. I think it was week 4. Hollywood Brown, unfortunately, could not get anything going. But yes, Tevin Coleman, Derrick Henry.
But what are they?
Golden
Because
Tate.
it's you on Sunday mornings, Saturday nights, or is it even before then?
Sunday mornings.
Going out on a ledge, on a limb, and saying, hey, this guy's going to have a monster week. I mean, you expected 100 yards and 2 touchdowns from Derrick Henry. Basically the same thing this past weekend with
Golden Tate.
And you've hit him. You've hit him. What's your thinking of this? Because these aren't names like, oh, Lamar Jackson's going to do this, Deshaun Watson's going to do this. It's some players that are kind of middle of the road.
Yeah, that's the goal. It's like an under-the-radar play. I usually kind of, a lot of things we do have DFS and season-long applications, but I try to keep it to a guy that might have under 10% ownership and just kind of an under-the-radar guy that I think has an especially good chance at going off. I think the rest of the industry is missing him. So it's been hot lately. I know we'll have cooler days in the future, but it literally just started with, it was week 1, Sunday morning, getting ready for the game to start, and the Chargers Twitter account just sent out the helicopter and some dumb tweet saying, like, tune in later. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'm going to steal that artwork and put it on my own. So
I appreciate the humility. It doesn't seem like you're nervous at all, despite more attention being paid to this as the weeks and weeks go by.
You got to roll with the ups and downs.
Any suggestions, any hints on who might be? Or does that kind of come to you Saturday night and in an epiphany?
I'm contractually obligated to never mention the helicopter play until Sunday morning. So.
My apologies.
It's okay.
So later on, we'll have Nick Mensio and his start sits. You all love that column, so we'll bring him on the show. We'll also talk about Ian's wide receiver and cornerbacks matchup. That's a column you can find on Rotoworld right now. But as we do every single time during this podcast, we'll start with a Thursday night football matchup. Now, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers facing the Cleveland Browns. Just a 40-point total the last time I checked in this one, but the Browns are 2.5-point favorites in this game, despite being 3-6. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are at 5-4. 4-game winning streak for said Steelers, and a lot of that, Ian, has become due to defensive play. Like, they've been outstanding on that side of the football.
It's been incredible, man. I mean, look, Minka Fitzpatrick is getting all the hype, as he should. League high 7 combined interceptions and forced fumbles this season. The guy's just making plays left and right. But rewatching that game last week, how good did Joe Hayden look? Because I kind of left him. I didn't leave him off for dead, but I think it was Preston Williams made a couple contested catches against him a couple weeks ago. I just wasn't. They haven't been moving around. I wasn't sure if he could still be this lockdown cornerback. 5 pass deflections, forced fumble, interception. Like, Joe Hayden looked all the way back last week, and it was a major reason why they held Cooper Kupp to a goose egg. TJ Watt, he's been talking about wanting to get out of his brother's shadow. He is. I mean, he's one of the best edge rushers in the league at this point.
Right.
It's the big trouble with them, I think, was trying to find someone in the middle of the defense to replace Ryan Shazier. I know Mike Lombardi says it a lot, like, your defense is only as fast as your middle linebacker. They struggled without him, one of the league's best linebackers last couple years. Devin Bush has had mishaps in coverage to this point, but just having an athlete like him out there, I think, has helped bring out the best in everyone else.
And we talked about this Steelers defense against the Rams this past weekend. The Rams team that is struggling with offensive line play, struggling at quarterback versus pressure, or even not against pressure. Well, guess what the Cleveland Browns are doing? They're struggling with offensive line play, then their quarterback is struggling as well. It's not a stretch to say that Bud Dupree, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, Joe Hayden, all playing outstanding football. I mean, this defense is up to number 3 overall in defensive DVOA, pass defense at number 4, run defense at 11. The offense has been the major question. So what do we think about Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham, Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry going up a defense that we should really care about, one that is one of the best units in the NFL?
I think we also need to start mentioning Kareem Hunt in that conversation, too, after the way they used them. Look, we've given Freddie Kitchens a ton of flack on this podcast all season. I think he's deserved a good amount of it, but what they did last week, makes me just the tiniest bit optimistic that they can maybe make a run at the end of the year. Because look, first game of Kareem Hunt, did they take Nick Chubb off the field unnecessarily? No. They kept him on the field. 81% snaps is what he's been playing a lot of the year. 20 carries, 4 targets. Keep giving your best offensive player the ball. They did that. Kareem Hunt, though, this is a guy that led the league in broken tackles as a rookie. Last year he was on pace to do so again until that whole fiasco happened. And what did he do in his first game? 54% snaps, 4 carries, 9 targets, career high 14 snaps in the slot and out wide. They're finding a way to get all their best players on the field at the same time. OBJ had a season-high 168 air yards, season-high 12 targets. They're making a concerted effort to try to get their best players involved, and to that I tip my hat to Kitchens.
And you mentioned Kareem Hunt. You know, a lot of people might say, well, is this a one-for-one then with Nick Chubb not having a possible major role? No, I mean, Nick Chubb still played about 82% of the snaps, so he's still absolutely going to be on the field. I mean, we still have to remember, though, that this is the Cleveland Browns. Like, they have not been good this season at all. In fact, their 19-16 win over the Bills was their first win in 5 games. First win in 5 games, and I'm not going to say that the Bills defense is as good as the Steelers defense, and especially against the run. It's this dynamic, though, of Odell Beckham versus Jarvis Landry. It's been obvious that they've wanted to get and incorporate Odell more and more each weekend. With that said, though, Jarvis Landry is still the most consistent wide receiver on this team, has double-digit targets in 3 straight games. I don't know, despite the optimism that you're showing, and I think that's fair. I think whenever we can pick out little optimistic thoughts of the Browns, that's a very good thing to do. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough here against the Steelers, despite the Steelers' offense being absolute garbage.
Yeah, Steelers' defense is awesome. This is a tough matchup for sure, but look, next 5 games, they play the Steelers, the Dolphins, Steelers again, the Bengals, and the Cardinals. I don't want to assume the Browns are going to beat anyone, but 3 of those games are they should win those games, and if they can split against the Steelers, all of a sudden they've won 5 of their last 6. So
and the Browns
there is a scenario where they sneak back in this playoff.
Well, and the Browns have taken the stance of saying, hey, if we lose, we're basically out of the playoffs. We have to win out to win it. Okay, let's look at the Steelers side of this equation on offense real quick. James Conner is back to practicing in full. We've seen Benny Snell. We've seen Jalen Samuels, we've seen all that, and none of them are what James Conner offers. But at the core of this offense right now is Mason Rudolph. And Mason Rudolph has been a borderline NFL quarterback this entire season. Nothing is exciting from his game. Nothing is enticing from his game. And that's a shame, because when you think back to his days at Oklahoma State, he was this big vertical passer with James Washington, and even came out and said that, I just don't have that big playability in me, basically, in the NFL, that I'm trying to play within the structure of the offense. Dude, the structure of the offense is around you right now, and you're just not very good at an NFL level.
Well, and he's got himself 3 receivers that are specifically good at those types of downfield and contested ball opportunities. In this offense, there's James Conner, and I think there's just everyone else. I can't get behind anyone else as a fantasy option, mostly because of just volume. Because, look, since their Week 7 bye, Juju and Jalen Samuels have 20 targets, Vance McDonald has 18, James Washington has 17, and Deontay Johnson has 15. I mean, they are spreading the ball out. Yeah. It's working. They're winning games. Good for them. But I think at this point, James Conner is the only person in this whole offense you can fire up with any sort of confidence.
Shocking that Juju Smith-Schuster and Deontay Johnson are basically the same exact person production-wise this season since Week 3. It's been wild to watch that. It's been very, very surprising.
Juju put together some wide receiver 2 weeks with Rudolph. Like he had the bad last week with Jalen Ramsey shadowing him into the slot, so I don't want to assume that's going to be every week. But yeah, man, it's been down. I wonder if the toe injury that has popped up a couple times in the injury report could maybe be impacting him more than he's letting on.
Not to put you in a corner here, but again, the Steelers are 5-4. If the playoffs started right now, they would be in that final wild card spot. Who are you picking in this game?
I got the Browns.
Good for you. See, if I get to ask, that means I don't have to answer as well. All right, Ian.
I'll be picking the Browns, probably not betting the Browns.
There we go. 2.5 again spread in that game. Let's go to your column. Wide receiver cornerback matchups. You have about 5 other columns as well, but we're focusing on this one today. Let's start with Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears versus Jalen Ramsey, which is still wild to say, of the Los Angeles Rams. We've seen Jalen Ramsey trail at times certain players this season. In his first game against the Atlanta Falcons, he did it at times against Julio Jones. We know that Allen Robinson is really the only real threat on the Bears right now. It would be a bit of a cautious play to have confidence in Allen Robinson this week. What do you think Jalen Ramsey matching up with him is going to do?
It's a problem. I mean, look, AB OBJ and Hopkins are the only guys to get over 100 yards in Ramsey's shadow coverage. He might give up a reception or two per game, but he does not let guys just go off against him. He's a great cornerback. Great cornerbacks don't let receivers do that. And the one thing you could take away with him when he was with the Jaguars was he would not move inside the slot other than maybe 5 to 10 high leverage opportunities per game. The first game of his career, he was actually a full-time slot cornerback, but since then, he had never played more than 15 snaps in the slot in a game. That changed last week. Wade Phillips said, you know what, Jalen, wherever Juju goes, you are going with him.
Really?
53% snaps as a true nickelback last week. By far the most he's played since that career debut. No one's safe anymore. No one's safe from Jalen Ramsey, and Allen Robinson is one of these wide receiver ones that spends a good amount of time in the slot. Man, most wide receiver cornerback matchups, even if it is a shadow date, like 60, 70, maybe 80% snaps, like worst case in that matchup. The way Ramsey's being played now, we could be seeing him on A-Rob nearly every route he runs.
That's super notable because I looked it up. Allen Robinson runs 60% of his routes from the outside, 40% on the inside. And while we say that Allen Robinson is a consistent member of the Bears offense and maybe the only one, it's not like it's been massive production. The past 3 games, 5 catches for 62 yards, 1 catch for 6 yards, then 6 catches for 86 yards, and this is one of his tougher matchups of the season.
Yeah, the 6-yard performance was against the Eagles too, like a certified smash spot. And you watch A-Rob, he's making contested catches. He looks awesome after the catch. It's just with the way Trubisky's playing, who actually had a good game last week, we'll give him a little credit there, but there's going to be inconsistency everywhere. In this tough matchup, I'm staying away.
Let's move on. DeAndre Hopkins against a name that I was surprised that you wrote down. I want to get your reasoning why. DeAndre Hopkins faced the Baltimore Ravens, but against Jimmy Smith, a corner who's missed some time this year, who stepped in. This is a secondary that I keep talking about because it's really emerging as one of the best in the NFL and a real difference maker on that Ravens defense, which struggled at the start of the year. But why do you have Jimmy Smith written down here for DeAndre Hopkins?
It's just their normal alignments. Like, they'll spend the most snaps across from each other, most likely, but he's going to see a bit of everyone. Marlon Humphrey has become their full-time slot cornerback. Marcus Peters on the other side. They had Humphrey shattering opposing number 1 wide receivers with a good amount of success early on in the season, but since they acquired Peters and since they got Smith back, they've pretty much been fine with letting offenses line up receivers however they want to, which, hey, it's worked. They've shut down the Patriots and Bengals over these last 2 weeks. I mean, that group of cornerbacks now, and I want to say their secondary in general if they still had Tony Jefferson and some of these guys,
right.
But think how much better they could be if they had that guy. But their cornerbacks have become the strength of the defense to this point. The thing with DeAndre Hopkins, though, is when did he become this underneath check down guy?
He's kind of been a floor play and not a ceiling play at all this year.
Like, it's been ridiculous, man. Like, look, he's got 13 straight games with at least 5 receptions. Like, you're getting, if he finds the end zone, gets to 100 yards, like, you're getting wide receiver 1 production out of him. But career low, 9.94 yard average target depth. That's 89th among all wide receivers. He's never even been below 12 before.
Can we just take a guess, a gander, some might say, and wonder why that's happening this year? Because it's not like Deshaun Watson has changed the way he plays football. Deshaun Watson is still very much a vertical passer, and honestly, the Texans' games kind of hinge on if he hits those big 3 or 4 vertical passes in a game or not. We've seen that multiple times this year, but it seems like a lot of those were going to Will Fuller, a lot of those were going to Kenny Stills, even Darren Fells in some situations, but they're not going to DeAndre Hopkins.
I think you just said it, man. We got new weapons in this offense that are taking away some of Hopkins' fantasy-friendly opportunities. He has as many targets as Darren Fells inside the 10-yard line, and obviously Kenny Stills is a much more certified field stretcher than, Kiki Kuti, DeAndre Carter, some of these other guys that have been, Demaryius Thomas last year. They keep surrounding Hopkins with these receivers. Other than Will Fuller over the years, no one has really been able to stretch the field. Now they got, if Fuller's healthy, 2 of those guys that can do that. So They don't need Hopkins to do it more, but the guy can do it. Just throw it up to him.
And like you mentioned, we're not trying to be negative here overly on DeAndre Hopkins. He's still one of the most consistent wide receivers across the league. In fact, he has at least 11 targets in 4 consecutive games. All right.
He's crushing it. I just wish he had a chance to crush it on more downfield stuff, yeah.
Julio Jones versus James Bradbury. That's the Atlanta Falcons against the Carolina Panthers. Julio Jones has at least 9 targets in each of his past 4 games. No Austin Hooper in this game. We've seen Julio Jones versus James Bradbury at other points during their times with their respective teams. The Panthers tend to put the bigger corner in Bradbury on the bigger receiver and then have Dante Jackson cover the smaller, quicker guys. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Bradbury shadow Julio Jones here.
If Bradbury plays, he's got this groin injury, wasn't able to sit up last week. I think Bradbury is one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the league. It's not like he's been immune to giving up a decent performance, but you almost never see him just 10 yards behind the receiver after getting completely deked by a double move or something like that.
And when you think about it, he's in the NFC South. So
it's tough.
If they match up with big corners every single time in those 6 games, or big receivers, it's Julio Jones, it's Michael Thomas, and it's Mike Evans. That's pretty tough 6 games every single year.
And we've seen him hold up reasonably well with that.
Especially Mike Evans.
That's what I was about to say. So even Julio, look, he's had some good games. He had the 300-yard performance in Bradbury's rookie year. So if we remove that,
I think Bradbury actually left that game about a quarter or 2 in.
At the very least, he was not shouting him full time.
No, he was not. And that was one of those games I think he caught a massive deep ball over Luke Kuechly's head. It was one of the most ridiculous performances you can ever remember.
I keep waiting. Look, Julio might not ever go for 300 yards again. Oh, right. Man, really going on a limb there. But I'm waiting for Mount St. Julio to erupt, and I think it could be this week because also number 2 cornerback Dante Jackson left last week with a leg injury. We got 6 straight scoreless games with Julio. He actually averages more receiving yards per game on the road than at home during his career. Look, I know the Panthers have been much better against the pass this year, number 3 in DVOA, number 2 in against the run, but it's been a long time. This could be the Julio eruption week we're looking for.
Once again, that was Ian's wide receiver cornerbacks matchups. Go and check that out on Rotoworld. Also, if you liked our Thursday night football preview, go and check out our next episode, Friday episode. We'll be previewing, 9 games with me, John, Hayden, and Pat. So go and listen to that one as well. All right, time for Nick Mensio's starts and sit. Nick, let's start off with John Brown against the Cleveland Browns. No, he gets Miami, excuse me. Last week against the Cleveland Browns, he had 11 targets, 5 catches, 77 yards. He is the top wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. That also means he's attached to Josh Allen.
Yeah, Brown is the overall wide receiver, 33.5 PPR points per game this season, but he's shown a solid floor in his first year with the Bills. Hasn't really provided the high ceilings games we were used to in Arizona and Baltimore, but he has just one 100-yard game on the year all the way back in week 1, only 2 touchdown catches. But he does have at least 5 catches and or 51 yards in every game this season, leading the Bills in targets at 7.9 per game. The floor's been there, like I said. He's paired with a bazooka-armed quarterback, Josh Allen. The Dolphins have allowed the 6th most pass plays of 20-plus yards. Miami is also 24th in fantasy points allowed to wideouts and 30th in pass defense DVOA. Only the Giants, Bucks, and Vikings have given up more touchdowns to position. And when these teams met back in week 7, Brown put up 5 catches for 83 yards and 1 touchdown as that week's wide receiver 10. So everything's stacking up for Brown and pretty much the entire Bills core of Allen, Brown, Cole Beasley, and Devin Singletary in this game. Low total at 40 points, but I think all 4 of those Bills are must starts in this spot.
Yes, Smokey Brown, Michael Thomas, only 2 wide receivers in the league with at least 50 yards in every game. It's weird that we're approaching Smokey as like a floor play that can hopefully go off, but that's kind of what it's turned into. Shadow coverage should be there with something named Nick Needham, N-I-K. Nick, one of these guys. I can't think of a better blow-up spot for Smokey Brown.
I feel like you should change your name in honor of this Nick to N-I-K. What do we have to do to get you to get rid of that C in your name?
Oh man, I know one dude, and that's actually my neighbor back home. His name is Nick without a C, so it's like the only dude I know without a C in his name.
Two touchdowns from Smokey, and you got to change your name.
There we go. I think that works. That's the name bet, right?
Name bet. Yep.
That's what we're going with. All right, next up, the next start is Tyler Boyd against the Oakland Raiders. Last week for Tyler Boyd against the Baltimore Ravens, he had 8 targets, 6 receptions, and 62 yards. Nick, we know that he's attached to Ryan Finley. Basically, nothing positive can come from this Bengals season, but there has been some consistency here with Tyler Boyd, especially now that as we head on week to week, it certainly seems like A.J. Green is not going to play at all this season.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd was the overall wide receiver, 22.5 PPR points per game, weeks 1 to 5. But he's tumbled all the way to wide receiver 69 from week 6 to 10.
Nice.
I knew that was coming. He averaged 10.4 targets per game the first 5 weeks compared to 9.5 over the last 5. Volume obviously isn't a concern. He just hasn't scored a touchdown since week 5 when he went 10-123-1 against the Cardinals. His last 4 receiving lines are 3-10-0, 5-55-0, 6-65-0, and 6-62-0. Kind of a nice little floor there in PPR, but his first game with Ryan Finley last week, he saw 8 targets, draws a Raiders defense this week that is 30th in passing yards allowed, 31st in touchdown passes given up, and 31st in fantasy points allowed to wideouts. Opposing number 1 receivers over the last 4 weeks, Keenan Allen, Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, and DeAndre Hopkins have all caught at least eight balls and or 100 yards and touchdown against the Raiders since their week 6 bye. I don't expect the Bengals to compete in this game, but I think there's a nice floor here for Boyd to see double-digit targets.
Moving over to the sits column, let's start off with Phillip Lindsay, obviously the running back for the Denver Broncos. He gets the Minnesota Vikings this week, but last week against the Cleveland Browns, low volume, just 9 carries, I believe, but racked up 92 yards and a touchdown. I don't think that was last week. That was just the last time they played. Are they coming off a bye?
Yeah, it was week
coming off a bye. What do you think about Phillip Lindsay against the Minnesota Vikings, a team that did very well, as we all saw, against Ezekiel Elliott? And we know that Phillip Lindsay is splitting quite a number of touches with Royce Freeman out of that backfield.
Yeah, like you mentioned last time out, 92 rushing yards. That was actually his second most of the season. Found the end zone for the 5th time this year in that game. However, those 9 touches, like you mentioned, were a season low. He had most of his production on a 40-yard run and a 30-yard touchdown run against the Browns. The Broncos ran a season-low 40 plays in Brandon Allen's first start. That's well below their season average of 60.4 plays per game. Vikings present a real stiff test. I mean, Minnesota's number 7 in rushing yards allowed, 12th in opponent yards per carry, number 5 in run defense DVOA, and number 5 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. As you mentioned as well, Lindsay and Royce Freeman just splitting work right down the middle. Freeman holds a slight snap share edge at 54% to Lindsay's 48%, but Lindsay's out touching Freeman on the year 143 to 120. I mean, just neither back is really an exciting fantasy play in this game. 39.5 point total, second lowest of the week, and Denver's implied total of 14.5 points is easily the week's lowest.
Broncos haven't scored more than 24 points in a game this season, and we're going to week 11. Yeah, I think, Josh, you've been saying this all year, play players from good offenses.
Yes. That's kind of the easiest thing we can do here.
Yes.
Is it doesn't matter about the volume necessarily if they are just on an absolutely atrocious team. But, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe it does work out for Phillip Lindsay, but, Nick's not counting on it. All right, let's close out this segment with Stefon Diggs. Another one of your sits, and some people might be surprised. He gets the aforementioned Denver Broncos this past weekend against the Dallas Cowboys. Just 6 targets, 3 receptions, 49 yards. Nick, a lot of people, when Adam Thielen went out, thought like targets would just be funneled towards Stefon Diggs. Well, he's matching up against top corners, and that's not necessarily the case. In fact, other pieces of this passing offense are the ones who are benefiting from it.
Yeah, I mean, he's strung together back-to-back receiving lines of 1-4-0 against the Chiefs and 3-49-0 against the Cowboys. Both games, Adam Thielen was out with a hamstring injury. Don't expect him to play this week, especially with the Vikings having their bye next week. He now catches a really tough matchup with Chris Harris and a Broncos defense that has allowed the 2nd fewest catches and 4th fewest fantasy points to opposing wideouts. Denver is also number 4 in passing yards allowed and hasn't allowed a 100-yard game to a receiver since week 1 when that was Tyrell Williams, went 6 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. The Broncos are number 9 in opponent plays per game. It just feels like a game where the Vikings should roll pretty easily. This is a 39.5 point total. The Vikings are double-digit home favorites. Dalvin Cook should just have no issues turning up yards on the ground. Kirk Cousins might not have to throw the ball more than 15 times. So it's hard to get behind Diggs with the low volume that he could see in this game.
You can check out Nick's full list of starts and sits over on Rotoworld right now. Some interesting names in that one. Nick, thanks so much, man. Ian, thank you, buddy.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate you always coming in here, sitting down, letting people listen with microphones on to what we talk about. I appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. Preview episode. Again, 9-game previews. Always a fun one. It's going to be a fun Week 11. Week 10 was outstanding. Week 11 will be even better. Everyone out there, thanks so much for listening. Talk to y'all soon. See ya.